This is functional communication training, school-wide implementation plan presented by students at Ball State University, Melissa, Zakia, Kelsey, Jotten, and Caitlin. This training is intended for functional communication training for Ellison Preschool. Ellison Preschool is a school with 200 students, of which 50 are regular education and 150 are special education. 50 students receive speech therapies, and half of them are nonverbal. There is also PECs that are being used for 5 of these students. There are 20 classrooms at the school, and each classroom has 8 to 12 students. There is a teacher and 2 assistants for every class. At the school level, there is a BCBA, there's a school principal, there are 2 speech pathologists, there is 1 occupational therapist, and for each of the classroom, there are 4 to 6 volunteers. So there are resources available at the classroom level. The school, there's a target behavior that is being requested for help for addressing. The children with the ASD have impaired communication abilities. So this impairment can result in negative behavior such as tantrum, self-injury, aggression, etc. There are often times when these negative behaviors act as form of communication itself. The school reports that the students are engaging in fighting and tantrum behavior while playing with toys. The fightings happen usually when the children are taking toys without asking or asking to play with another child. The school has retained ABC Solutions Incorporated for help. ABC Solutions is our team that is determined that FCT, or functional communication training, will be an appropriate intervention to address for the identified needs at the Ellison Preschool.
Functional communication training is an intervention that focuses on teaching individuals communication that is socially acceptable. This can be through different topographies such as sign language, vocalizations, or PEC system, or other communication devices. Functional communication also renders the same function of reinforcement of the behavior that has been maintained. And Cooper and Heron cite functional communication training as an approach for an alternative behavior. The alternative communication response is reinforced on a dense schedule, while negative behavior does not access reinforcement leading to extinction. So overall, replacing the problem behavior with communication serves the same function. So we chose FCT because it provides the same class of reinforcement as the problem behavior. It is an evidence-based intervention, and it has success in a variety of environments, and it has been shown to be able to be applied by teachers and other paraprofessionals. It will likely decrease the problem behavior, such as the tantrum and fightings, and it will also provide a communicative response, and that is socially acceptable. It is appropriate for Ellison Preschool as it provides students with an appropriate communication form to access reinforcements. It's practical for implication on a larger scale, such as a school or individualized clients. We are using FCT training as a Tier 1 intervention at Ellison Preschool as a school-wide positive behavior support. It will be able to be applied to all students that are participating in the school. And if need to be, FCT can also be used as a Tier 2 or 3 intervention. Who will implement this? It will be the BCBA on site, 2 speech pathologists from the school, and a teacher from each of the 20 classrooms, the 2 assistants per classroom, and 4 to 6 daily volunteers. From this group of individuals that will be implementing, there will be a team leaders, and these individuals will be determined by the BCBA on site from the recommendations of the principal. The team leaders are responsible for supporting other teachers with the materials, IOA data collection, and intervention maintenance. These team leaders will be a BCBA, both speech pathologists, a single teacher, an assistant teacher, and one volunteer. So the staff will be trained on FCT after school, Wednesday through Friday during 4-hour sessions. They will be compensated with their time through salary or hourly pay. The total training time will take about 12 hours. During this time, it will be a group training environment, and if need to be, there can be individualized training later on. The team is encouraged to reach out to the BCBA or leadership team throughout the whole intervention if they have any questions. During the intervention, staff will also be given feedback continuously and updates and maintenance as needed. For FCT training, the staff members will be provided with the overview of FCT, the 3 steps, the interactive models, and they will be doing modeling and mock practice as role playings, and there will be check-ins throughout the duration.
There are 3 steps for the implementation of functional communication training. The first step is conduct a functional behavior assessment. Step 2 is identify a communicative response. And then the third step will be develop and implement a treatment plan. So step number 1 is the staff members at Ellison Preschool will start by conducting an FBA. An FBA is the most feasible approach to identifying the function of a target behavior in a classroom setting. Both indirect and direct measures can be utilized to hypothesize the function of the behavior. It is likely that we are aware of the function of the behavior based on information provided by the staff members at Ellison Preschool. Identifying the function of the target behavior will be crucial to selecting the functional communication response form. Step number 2 is choosing a communication response form. So how do you go about doing that? Communication response forms range from vocal responses and approximation, sign language, gestures, using a PEC system, etc. And the response form is chosen with the child's skill repertoire in mind. So we would not be choosing a verbal response for a child who is nonverbal. So step number 2 is some things to consider when choosing your response form. First thing, response effort. Does the response form abolish the motivation to utilize the response form? In the initial stages of FCT training, a simple response form should be chosen and reinforced. But after the student is able to independently emit that simple FCT response, a more complex FCT response can be used, and this will lead to an increase in generalization of the skill. The second thing to consider is social recognition. We will be assessing the child's audience and ensuring that the response form we use is appropriate for their audience, and we want to make sure that even a novel audience would be able to understand the communication response form and be able to deliver the appropriate reinforcement. The third thing to consider is the response acquisition rate. So how quickly is the student able to acquire the response form? The longer it takes, the less time they will have to access reinforcement. So we want to make sure that it is something that they're able to do and learn quickly so that they can begin utilizing this replacement behavior and we can place the tantrum behavior on extinction. And step 3 of the implementation of FCT will be using errorless teaching at the beginning. So we'll be teaching that FCT response form errorlessly. We will be using a least to most intrusive prompting hierarchy. So we will be prompting with the least amount of prompts so that we can begin fading those as quickly as possible. And something to note when teaching the FCT response form, it is likely that negative behavior or tantrum behaviors will still be present. So we want to make sure that we do not reinforce those interfering behaviors, and we need to place them on extinction.
So the materials that we need in order to complete this intervention is an intervention team, of course, the classroom for the natural teaching opportunities for these children, reinforcers, so anything that these children or these students have requested, or an activity that they have requested, the data sheets to mark for the functional communication response and if the tantrum has occurred, timers, so pencils and clipboards, and computer for data input and analysis. Where will the FCT training take place? It will take place during the normal playtime within each classroom, so the natural environment learning, and ability to focus on teaching the functional communication response. Lots of opportunities for students to access reinforcement for appropriate admission of this response, of the functional communication response. And here is another, just an additional functional communication training video.
Time sampling method will be used. The specific method includes collecting the data on a specific schedule, but because in the classroom the free time varies depending on the classroom of all the 20 classrooms, the free time is when we want to actually collect the data. So individual teacher would have the discretion of figuring that out, but during that free time the data will be collected on 5-minute intervals. If there's no tantrum behaviors observed, then the data sheet will be left blank. Besides the data collection, we'll also be doing inter-observer approval data on a once-a-week basis. So this IOA data will be recorded periodically every week by having a second person. So the primary person recording the data is the teacher's assistant, but for IOA data, the second assistant will be recording the data. So, and then 90% is our target for IOA. That will be required for recording to be considered valid. And if it falls below 90%, then there will be a retraining requirement that will be mandatory. Here is the data sheet. And in the data sheet, basically what we're recording is the individual time period are shown all the way from 8:30 till 4:30. This does not mean that every field will be filled out. There are two things here. One is FCR, which is the functional communicative response. So if a child responds with a functional communication response that we want the child to, or children to exhibit, that will be marked within that box. And if there's a tantrum behavior that is observed, then that will be marked for that specific observation. So that's how the data will be recorded. And then we will also record in the total percentage of the FCR behavior and the tantrum behavior. If there is no observation within that time period, that will be left out blank. And that will not impact the percentage FCR or the percentage tantrum behavior calculation.
Generalization. Students should be provided with learning opportunities throughout the day in a variety of environments, materials, and people. Expand materials by systematically adding new materials. Expand training to all involved in the implementation of the goals, which includes parents, grandparents, teachers, coaches, and peers. Ways to implement generalization. Staff members can use generalization strategies when teaching FCT, such as practice communication skills with a variety of peers and adults, teach in the natural environment, use naturally reinforcing materials, teach skills in different settings like school, home, park, or the job site. Teach different ways of implementing the same task. For example, requesting a cup of water at home, at a restaurant, and at the school cafeteria. Linking new skills to already mastered skills. Expand materials used by systematically adding new materials. Provide opportunities for new skills to be practiced regularly. Provide training for all involved in implementing of the goals. For example, parents, grandparents, teachers, coaches, peers, and siblings. Tips for implementation. Ensure the replacement behavior is appropriate for the student's skill repertoire. Train frequently, stay alert, and actively supervise for potential opportunities in which the student could contact reinforcement for tantrum behavior instead of the FCT response. Review data collection sheets throughout the intervals to ensure accurate data collection is occurring. Please see the reference page for more resources. Thank you.